I'm joined now by the mayor of Cincinnati and the man who beat JD Vance's brother by a 60-point margin in that race that occurred on Tuesday night. Aftab Pureval, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an exciting time here in Cincinnati.
So first and foremost, I want to ask about that race. I know that JD Vance is one of your constituents in Cincinnati,
Yeah.
and so, what was it like having to run that race? Obviously, he was endorsed by the sitting vice president of the United States, and
Yeah.
then what was it like to defeat him by an 80-20 margin?
Well, it's incredibly gratifying, frankly, that the city of Cincinnati came out and rejected so much of the xenophobia and the racism that is coming from Washington, D.C. and being echoed by these MAGA candidates, even at the local level right here. It's an unusual thing that I am the mayor of JD Vance and was running against his brother for re-election. I didn't know he had a brother. He wasn't in the book or the movie, so it was until he filed to run. I was a little bit confused by that, but this year has been challenging. We've had some public safety challenges that my opponent tried to cynically take advantage of. MAGA kind of descended on my city, trying to make us afraid of each other. Because we ran a campaign and have been running the city in a way that really focuses on improving people's lives, specifically around affordability, and also being kind of a safe place given the cruelty that's coming out of Washington, D.C. I think that those were keys to being successful and being able to beat back MAGA from taking over City Hall.
Now, you said something that caught my attention, and that was that obviously MAGA came in and tried to make everybody afraid of each other. That does seem to be a recurring theme throughout the entirety of this administration. It is ultra wealthy people at the top using culture war issues as wedge issues to pit working class people against other working class people while they basically screw everybody over at the top. And so do you think that the folks in your city, for example, have kind of recognized the con for what it is?
I think so. I hope so. I mean, fundamentally, if we just back out and take all the politics out of it, these MAGA candidates are running across the country for whether it's mayor or governor or senator, and they're doing so by just running down and criticizing the places that they are trying to lead. And this campaign is a perfect example of that. My opponent was never in the community at the community forums, meeting with people on the ground. He was constantly on Fox News and Newsmax, just criticizing the city, a city he had just moved to 4 years ago. And it strikes me as a strange strategy to try to run down and criticize on a national stage a city that you're ultimately trying to lead. At the end of the day, I think this campaign was about people loving our city, overcoming people who were trying to run it down just to get access to power. And that naked ambition to just get power, oftentimes to be cruel towards people. I think folks are starting to catch on to that. And look, mayor's different, right? When you're in the legislature, and no shade to my colleagues, but when you're mayor, it's a real job. And it doesn't really matter if the idea is Republican or Democratic. People on the ground are looking for leaders to improve their lives, no matter what that strategy is. Mayors, the ones that are most successful around the country, are far more pragmatic than partisan. But even in these kind of hyper partisan times, I think these successful races you've seen across the country, whether it's for governor or for mayor, is because those folks running and winning have an actual plan to improve people's lives and lift them up out of poverty or tackle generational gun violence, and are not just running on who to blame or who to fear or the mistakes of the past. I think that was a big difference in this race.
As we look toward 2026, I know we'll give ourselves 5 minutes to enjoy the wins that we had in 2025, but eventually the work is going to start for 2026. A state like yours, Ohio, is not a state that's been friendly to Democrats. It's gotten farther and farther away from Democrats over the last couple of decades here. And so what lessons would you have for other Democrats looking to lead cities or towns in red states like yours? And granted, I know that I'm asking this question recognizing that this is within the lens of a Big Tent party, and so what's going to work in New York City is not necessarily going to work in some other state somewhere else across the country. Jared Golden's district is certainly different than AOC's district, and on and on.
Yep.
But for people in similar situations as you, what advice would you have in terms of running a winning campaign?
Gosh, people are desperate for leadership. They're craving it. They're calling out for it. They're not getting it at the federal level. They're oftentimes not getting it at the state level, and they need it to happen at the local level. There's never been a more important time for local leaders to be really good at their job, whether it's the Medicaid cuts that are coming that are going to impact our community disproportionately, whether it's the cuts to Head Start or, of course, the SNAP and EBT cuts. People want solutions. They don't want folks blaming or obfuscating or spinning. And again, mayors are perfectly situated for this. It's almost trite now, but will often say there's three political parties, Republicans, Democrats, and mayors, or there's no Republican or Democratic way to fix a pothole. They're cliches, but there's truth to it, right? Because mayors are in the get crap done caucus. We just want to push the ball forward. And in these hyper partisan times, it can almost feel impossible to collaborate or compromise. Let me give you just two examples. We've had some real public safety challenges in our downtown area. I partnered with a Republican governor, Mike DeWine, to increase our police presence by having Highway Patrol come down and support Cincinnati Police Department. Bernie Moreno, our MAGA senator, again was just running down the city on national news, called on me to step down, called on the federal government to defund Cincinnati because of these challenges. And 2 weeks later, I met with him and started collaborating with him on how to actually improve public safety in our city. Mayors will work with anyone because we are looking for actual solutions, and that real, genuine leadership, not blaming other people, not pointing fingers, but rather being a convener, bringing everyone together and saying, okay, if you really care about public safety, help me fund recruit classes to get more police officers on the ground. If you really care about public safety, then stop flooding my community with guns. There are more guns than people in our city, and it making it impossible for police officers to actually maintain safety. I'll give you an example. If you're a police officer in Cincinnati and by state law, everyone around you is able to open carry, how do you know who is allowed to have a gun and who is not? And I'll go one step further. How do you know who the threat is and who the threat is not? I mean, we are putting police officers' lives in danger because of these insane laws, and mayors understand that, can call that out. And I think that's what people are craving, that authenticity, that let's get stuff done together mentality, instead of just looking at, what's popular, what's not popular, what's a wedge issue, bringing people together and actually governing. That would be my recommendation.
Okay, well, on that point of getting stuff done, you've done exactly that. You've eliminated medical debt for an entire third of your city. And so can you talk about that, especially in light of the fact that that's what you've used your political capital on, at the same time that your constituent, JD Vance, and his administration have used their political capital not on doing the same thing, but on ripping healthcare away from people, cutting Medicaid away from 17 million Americans, using the prospect of the government shutdown to try and rip away those ACA subsidies that will result in Americans seeing their healthcare costs double or triple or quadruple, and ultimately removing $1 trillion from healthcare from the federal budget.
Yeah, it's awful. It's scary. And, oftentimes we hear these numbers from national news, and, we're desensitized to it. But when you're on the ground, when you're a mayor and you see that 70% of the patients using our city-run health centers are Medicaid eligible, it becomes very real that thousands and thousands of people, our most vulnerable in our city, are at risk of no longer having access to healthcare, which is going to be a huge weight. Put aside the ethical and concerns for just human life and dignity. That is a massive weight on our own economy because we're going to have to support these vulnerable communities somehow. And so, look, if we can back out again, this is a really important issue on a whole host of fronts. We've been talking about public safety, and public safety seems to be the wedge issue that MAGA Republicans are trying to drive.
Yeah.
Well, my point is, we want to have the same energy and urgency supporting our public safety professionals like CPD. That same energy and urgency has to be directed towards the root cause of this violence, which is poverty. And debt in general is holding back a third of my city from creating those generational wealth opportunities, whether it's getting a job or owning a home. Debt is holding people back. And so we did a study with Bloomberg Philanthropies to show that debt was a huge obstacle to actually lifting people out of poverty, coupled with the fact that because of these cuts coming, people are going to only go deeper into debt and drive down their opportunities for career advancement. And so we really tried to fashion our solution, keeping those things in mind. And so we were able to buy medical debt in collaboration with the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, which is our largest hospital network here in Cincinnati. We were able to buy debt on pennies on the dollar, which allowed us to make about a $2 million investment that wiped out $220 million worth of medical debt. And that is important because not only is that peace of mind, mental health alleviation, but it also improves people's credit score to help them be able to, again, create more wealth for themselves and their family.
Right, and stimulate the economy as well. If somebody's in a better financial situation themselves, then they can help the city that they live in. And so, given the success you've seen with this program, have you worked in conjunction with any other mayors or governors to export this program, this strategy elsewhere?
Yeah, so we're currently working with our county government in order to have even more of an impact by creating more of a public-private partnership between the city, the county, our local Fortune 500s, and our hospital networks. But this model can be applied in a whole host of other ways. We're looking at it to apply to court fees that are oftentimes holding people back when they're in arrears. We're looking at it for property taxes because we're in a housing crisis here in Cincinnati. We're not able to build enough housing stock in order to keep up with our population increase. And so, of course, mortgages, property taxes, rents are going through the roof. And so we're also partnering with our local county treasurer who accumulates or gets the property taxes from our folks to again buy down debt that they're unlikely to see being paid back on pennies on the dollar. And so now if you're in Cincinnati and you owe property taxes and your home is valued at $100,000 or less, we will eliminate that property tax balance. And that's not just important for that specific homeowner. It's important because by passing down that property to the next generation free of any debts or liens, again, you're creating more opportunities for generational wealth. And to your point, you're creating more opportunities for people to invest back into our local economy.
Last question here. I want to talk about the prospect of ICE coming into your city. Has that been something that's been floated at all? And what would you do in the event that the administration does try to send ICE into Cincinnati?
Yeah, we would fight back. I mean, we've had some very specific instances where ICE has had a presence in our community. Thankfully, we have not yet seen an ICE raid, but this is personal to me. I'm the son of a refugee. My mom was born in Tibet and was forced to flee when the communists took over. She grew up in a refugee camp in southern India. She made it to college, met my father, who's from Punjab. I'm half Tibetan, half Punjabi, and they immigrated of all places to Beaver Creek, Ohio. Now, if my parents followed the rules, and when I was born, they were not yet citizens, even though they were documented. If MAGA's, getting rid of birthright citizenship takes place, I would not be a U.S. citizen. Even if I was a U.S. citizen, I would probably not be living here if they had accused my parents of eating cats and dogs, as JD Vance did,
Yeah.
those Springfield Haitian immigrants just an hour north of here. So many immigrant populations that I represent are living in fear. And the public policy impact of that is profound, even here on the local level. We're seeing truancy rates going up in Cincinnati public schools because parents no longer feel comfortable sending their kids to school for fear that a federal masked agent is going to kidnap them. We're seeing, witnesses of violent crime and victims of violent crime no longer feel comfortable going to Cincinnati Police Department and helping with prosecutions because they fear themselves being, arrested and deported rather than being supported. And so we've been very clear in Cincinnati. We are proudly a sanctuary city. We will not cooperate with ICE. There is no role for local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration laws, and the Supreme Court has been very clear on that. And frankly, with a 2% Asian population and a 3% Hispanic population, we do not have an undocumented immigrant problem. We have a gun violence problem. We need ATF and FBI agents here. We don't need ICE agents here. And so we're going to do everything we can to both keep people safe, but also support our immigrant populations. And look, a CPD will never ask people what their kind of document or immigration status is. But if you commit a violent crime in Cincinnati, I don't care what your immigration status is. We're going to come after you. We're going to arrest you, and if necessary, the federal government will likely deport you. public safety, violent crime, those are our top priorities. And if you commit those kinds of acts, we will hold you accountable. But again, I would much rather us being focused on gun violence and the actual problems that are facing our community rather than these trumped up federal issues that really, frankly, are only negatively impacting us.
We'll leave it there. Thank you so much for taking the time today. Congratulations on your election win, and thank you in particular for sparing us one more member of the Vance family being in the government. Appreciate
My
your time.
pleasure, man. Thanks so much for the opportunity.